Hi, my name is Maria and welcome to my channel MH Books. And today I'm going to wrap up a few books that I think I haven't really wrapped up well enough. I've done a few others on vlogs and I think they were okay, but so there would have been vlogs as part of readathons. So there would have been, from Women in Translation and from Through the Sun. There was a few that was wrapped up as part of that. But these I don't think were, so I'm just going to do this so I can tidy up that piece of my shelf, because I need to make some more space on my shelf for the new things I'm reading, and not the fact that I just bought some books and I need to put them on the same shelf because I need to be, No, I didn't buy them. I did buy them. Yeah, new books, yeah, I did. So to anybody who works 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, or just Monday to Friday, welcome to the hump of the week. This is Wednesday afternoon. I finished up work early because my account's bounced. Yay. So I have some daylight, so I'm going to try to do this. The budgies are quite happily looking at their mirror in another room. So the first one here is The Moonstone, which I was reading for Thriller-a-thon. I got about halfway through, I think, and then I switched over to another book here, which I didn't wrap up for Thriller-a-thon either. I switched over to this one. So I've only finished this actually within the last day or so. I am going to just look down here at my laptop because I forget the name of this book. But this book, The Moonstone, was inspired in part by a real case of, that involved one of the first real detectives in the Victorian era. And you can read about it in Kate Summerscale's book, The Suspicions of Mr. Witcher. I'm going to put it here. So, The Suspicions of Mr. Witcher, A Shocking Murder, and The Undoing of a Great Victorian Detective. So I haven't read that first. I could see how this was inspired by that story. There's a lot, the real story is to do with quite a grisly murder of a young child, whereas this one is about theft of a diamond. But there is an important piece of evidence in that there was a nightdress that was missing from the scene that everybody was looking for in both the fictional and the non-fictional work. Also, the detective here, who is Sergeant Cuff, is inspired by Mr. Witcher, which was the detective in the thing. So the Victorians who read this would have read the original case in the papers that inspired the story. And in turn, The Moonstone has seemingly inspired Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes. So, and I can see that too. That it's, yeah, you can see how the intelligent detective working with a lesser obviously intelligent person is how, but maybe a more emotionally intelligent person, is how a lot of the case is solved. We also have here all the fundamentals we have of a detective story. We have Sergeant Cuff with all his foibles. He loves roses and will get easily distracted into an argument about roses. We have there is like the time of the crime was located based upon when paint was wet, so they could time the crime. So it's all the fundamentals we'd expect from a normal detective story. It's told in a multi-personal perspective, so each character writes a piece and then goes on to the next piece. It's a unique way of telling a story nowadays, because most of the police procedural stuff I would read would be in a kind of either a first person perspective or maybe a third person perspective, but I haven't really come across very many in the crime genre that tells the story from one person to another person to another person, and not in the way that this one does. I actually think it's a nice format, and I might one day I'd actually, copy art and copy it maybe for an idea for one of my own stories that have mysteries, that I wouldn't write a detective story. If you like classics, if you like crime genre, you should have read this already. If you haven't, read it because you're gonna love it, and I highly recommend it. So as I've already picked up this book, let's go on to this book. I'm going to put in a clip on this book on my thoughts on when I was reading one morning. So I'm going to insert it here. I just had to share this because I used to be a research scientist in St Andrews in Scotland. That's where I did my PhD. And the only reason you could skip certain experiments, because we did biological experiments and there was life cycles involved, was if you had a tee off time in the old course. So that's how important golfing was in St Andrews. And this guy has just taken up golfing on the recommendation of his doctor. So we'll read just 2 paragraphs. It's so true. Relax, the doctor said during his last blood pressure checkup at the Memorial Hospital. Get some exercise and fresh air. Take up a sport, but nothing too strenuous. He remembers looking forward to his retirement for over 20 years. But taking up golf is emotionally and financially the biggest single mistake he's made since leaving the company. Hacking at the long grass in the dunes with his custom-made iron, he begins to search for the ball. The club should have been covered and put back with the others. Its material value exceeds even that of the new wood, but has let him down, failing to live up to its graphite and alloy promise. Churlishly, he believes this alternative use of the club as its trimmer will register as punishment inside its gleaming but treacherous shaft. And it is. It's just so typical. Now, I think they're going back to find a dead body, so I'm just going to go away and leave you there. Did I insert it? I hope I did. Okay. Adam Neville, Banquet of the Damned, also read for Thrillathon. It's a horror. But you see, this one has a special place in my heart because it's set in St Andrews. So I'm going to like it more because he wrote the book about 2 or 3 years. He's doing his master's in St Andrews. Adam Neville was. And I would have done my PhD from 2000 to 2004. So I actually just every now and again went, well, actually that's slightly cheaper than I would have paid for it, but everything about St Andrews was perfect. St Andrews is a little town in Scotland, mostly university. It's the home of golf, where golf originated. Teeny tiny university. This town itself is small and has 3 streets, but it's a medieval town. It is perfect for a horror novel. Adam Neville loves to concentrate on, because I've read 2 books, so obviously I know, but he likes to concentrate on cults and things, so it is very cultish. He does refer to the cult being based upon Scottish witchcraft tales, so it is well researched in that sense. He definitely wrote this while he was doing his master's because he was in all those places when he was writing, because he got the details right and he actually reminded me of some of them. It's a very good book about male-male relationships. The characters, so the synopsis of the book, I'm not very good at saying the synopsis because I don't like to read the synopsis, so I forget sometimes that other people might want to know the basic synopsis. 2 musicians move into St Andrews because one of them is going to write the next album, or their next music CD. This is 1998. It's going to be a CD in 1998, isn't it? That's inspired by a piece of literature that one of the academics in the university has written, and it's about cults and things. So he's going to write his next big album based on that, and hopefully this is the one that's going to get them off. So that's why they've moved in. Another academic moves in because he hears that there's been night terrors amongst the students, so he wants to study the night terrors. And yes, the reason for the night terrors and the scariness with students happens. I liked it. I cannot tell you what it's like to read if you're not there going, oh wow, this is St Andrews. So I mean, for me it was very much about the place. Got the place right, got the characters fairly well. Like all horror novels, weak at the ending. I have yet, except for maybe Shirley Jackson, who I like the ending of, and other people don't, not met many horror writers who can give a good ending. But then I can't do it either, so fair enough. For Women in Translation, the two books I haven't wrapped up yet. Anne Frank's diary, read because it's a piece of non-fiction. I read, and I'm going to insert the picture now that I know how to do it. I read it from the anniversary edition. It's actually a different translator. So I'm just going to stop you, and I'm going to look up the names of the translators and put them up here so we can talk about that. Okay, hold on, because I'm having problems locating the translators, which is quite common in older translated works. They never gave the translator their credit for what they did. I'm assuming this one is the more modern work. So this is, because it says it's 70th edition on the picture, I'm assuming it is the 70th edition, and that this one is the 1995 translation by Susan Massotti. Would that be right? 1995. Let's take 1995 and take the 70 years from that, and we're going to get 1925. So it's even more modern. Okay, so it's definitely the more modern edition. I'm assuming this is the older edition because it was a cheap copy. But just, it's interesting to see how the translation works, because this is about translation. So I'm going to read the 28th of March entry, just the first sentence. So it's Tuesday the 28th of March. Dearest Kitty, I could write a lot more about politics, but I have heaps of other things to tell you today. First, Mummy has more or less forbidden me to go upstairs so often because, according to her, Mrs. Van Deen is jealous. Secondly, Peter has invited Margot to join us upstairs. Now, let's have a listen to what this translation says for the first.
Saturday, the 18th of March, 1944.
I'm not doing that because
Tuesday, the 28th of March, 1944. My dearest Kitty, as much as I'd like to write more on politics, I have lots of other news to report today. First, Mother has virtually forbidden me to go up to Pater's, since, according to her, Mrs. Van Daan is jealous.
Okay. More or less the same information, but quite a different translation. So you can see how over time, reading a book, the translator does matter, and that's important. So, I mean, if they do the work on this, I think they should get the credit. I'm just saying. I do realise there's more than one version of Anne Frank's diary. So, for those who don't know, it's covered in the beginning of both of them. There was two diaries written. She wrote her first diary from the age of 13 to 15, and then from when she was late, and she was 14, late on that year, she listens to a radio broadcast. It's actually in the diary, and they're saying how diaries would be important in the future about the war. So she rewrote her diary. And she edited it. Okay, so there were two bits. And then her dad, who got the diary, who was the only survivor from her family, got the diary, put it together, edited it severely, took about a third of it out because the bit that I really said, because I'm not saying, because my nephew said he's going to watch this and his daddy might kill me, was about legs. Don't tell daddy. So her dad was a little bit like embarrassed about it. Maybe her dad was like my brother, and so the third was cut out. She talks about their parents' relationships. I assume all that was cut out. So this was put back into her diary. Other bits and pieces were found. It's been re-edited over the years. So there are different versions of the diary. And believe if you go to the Anne Frank house, you can actually see both diaries. I would love to go to the Anne Frank house with somebody. I do know somebody, Mark, who actually is Dutch, and get him to read for me and tell me whether that girl really wrote that standard at the ages of, well, I mean, she edited when she was 15, when she was only 15, because it is amazing. She knew a lot about what was going on. I do know she was locked into an annex and she had nothing to do but listening to the radio and listen to adults talk. But she has thoughts and feelings and ability to write that was way above her years. I also think she was a terrible, terrible, terrible teenager, and she drove her mother mad. I feel so sorry for her mother. I cut myself off there because Anne Frank's real life ending obviously was horrendous. It's a shame she never got to be an adult and to see and to comment on what she thought of her own teenage diary. And I'm just going to leave it at that. And go straight on to Go Went Gone, which is the other translated work. This one translated from German. So it's based upon, I thought this title was weird, like Go Went Gone, and now I understand, is the different tenses of the verb go. So it's Go Went Gone in English, Gehen ging gegangen in German, and it's because this is a story about refugees in about 2013-2014 in Berlin who are studying German, and they have, one of them has the gang so that they know how the irregular verb to go works in German. It's also irregular in English. Lucky us. The book is marked. I haven't prepped this. I haven't read this book in about 2 weeks, so I did mark things for me to do. And I see this one. I remember this one. This one is food. This story is about Richard, isn't it? His name is Richard. See, 2 weeks and I've forgotten. I think I might do my wrap-ups as soon as I finish books and then just put the video together. You know, at different stages, at different me's and different times. So Richard is an East German. He's one of the main protagonists in the book. He has just retired from academia. He misses the fact that there's some refugees protesting in Orientplatz. I am pronouncing that wrong. I write the word. And he wonders how could possibly miss them. I think he sees on the news or something, and he wonders how could I possibly miss that. And that starts his thorough, fascination with this topic. And as an academic, he gets fairly obsessed. Academics are like that. I worked with academics. They do this. It's very true to their nature. But one of the ways that you can tell his progression to the book is with food. And if anybody's listened to or watched a couple of my videos, I can sometimes be obsessed with food myself. So he starts off as a typical German, and it's quite common in Germany to have sandwiches rather than when we would have had dinner, and have open-faced sandwiches. That's why it's translated here. It's called Abendbrot, so it's evening bread, and that's, some parts of Germany have that instead of dinner, like they have it in the evening. And he starts off with this very traditional German food, and the food is described all the way through, but near the end he's eating African dishes straight from the pot with his hand, no plates. So this is, the food shows his journey. What else did I do? Okay, this one says detailed, and this is his brain. This bit is to remind me, this is the one piece I didn't like about this book was, and it's true to his character, is he needs to know loads of questions, okay? So these are the questions. He's fascinated with these refugees. And these are the questions he wants to ask them, okay? This is page 39. Where did you grow up? What's your native language? What religious affiliation? How many people are in your family? What did the apartment or house you grew up look like? How did your parents meet? Was there a TV? Where did you sleep? What did you eat? What was your favourite hiding place when you were a child? Did you go to school? What sort of clothing did you wear? Did you have pets? Did you learn a trade? Do you have a family of your own? When did you leave a country of your birth? Why? Are you still in contact with your family? What was your goal when you left home? How did you say goodbye? What did you take with you when you left? What did you think Europe would be like? What's different? How do you spend your days? What do you miss most? What do you wish for? If you had children who were growing up here, what would you tell them about your homeland? Can you imagine growing old here? Where do you want to be buried? He prepares all these questions before he meets these refugees. He wants to ask them all. And he believes that it's not in the questions, it's in the details of the questions that the truth emerges, and it's not actually in the answers to the questions. And Jenny Erpenback seems to be doing this in this book. She gives an awful lot of details about an awful lot of things, like including food, and it's you know, not in the details themselves, but in what emerges from those details that tells the story of the book. But in some places, I actually just found all those details, like all those questions, incredibly boring, and that wouldn't have been my way of finding things out. That's all. It is a legitimate artistic move on her part. It's just my preference. I prefer to infer what's happening from the actions of the characters, because I'm more of a character person. But I mean, this is still a 4-star book. This is still very good. The other thing I marked was the writing. So it's in pink. So pink is usually my indication it's something I liked or loved, because pink for love. So this is just her writing style. I liked her prose style. So in the beginning was an undifferentiated whole that contained everything, feminine and masculine, space and time, sameness and multiplicity. This totality sank down through the emptiness and revealed itself in multifarious off there again, because I was trash on that piece, that paragraph, and I'm just not going. I tried it a couple of times. I'm not getting it. Just suffice to say, there are places where she writes things and the prose is beautiful. In that case, that paragraph was a paragraph where Richard was reading from a book, and this is what he was reading. So she had to write what he was reading, and what he was reading was a book that was full of beautiful detail, but a lot of detail again. So you see the theme of there's a lot of detail in this book. The other theme that I'll just broach upon is me and Richard have something in common. We have a terrible time pronouncing people's names, so he makes up new names for people, so that he can remember who they are, and he bases it on his past academic work. Yeah, and I think, you know, that's something we do in Ireland a lot. We have an awful lot. We've had a lot of largish Chinese community, Cantonese community for a while, and all of them have Irish names as well as their actual names, because we can't pronounce them, which is, I know, shocking, but also very true. So there we are. That's what we're like. The last book is, okay, cut myself off there. Starting to panic because the light is fading. Even though I could turn on the light, I just don't like my nose being shiny, even though it's shiny from that light. Oh well. First book I've read ever of Elizabeth Taylor. First book she wrote. We're reading them in order. I'll leave the link to the Goodreads group below. And this is at Mrs. Lippincote's. I think the best way to describe it as a quiet family drama. It's about Julia and her husband Roddy. Roddy is an officer in the RAF, and this is set in the Second World War, and he's been asked to move his wife from London to close to the base by the RAF. So they move into Mrs. Lippincote's house, and Mrs. Lippincote has left her furniture and some of her knickknacks around in the house, and it's actually locked one of the rooms. And Mrs. Lippincote and her daughter do appear every now and again in the book. Julia is our central protagonist and our central character in this story. She doesn't like her husband's cousin Eleanor, who is a 40-year-old spinster who lives with them, who's also a teacher at Julia and Roddy's son Oliver's school. Oliver is a charming character. He loves books, and so does Julia, and they bond an awful lot over books. They're into the Brontes, and surprisingly enough, so is Roddy's wing commander or boss, and he has visited the Bronte house, etc. So the wing commander, Roddy's boss, her husband's boss, and Julia bond a bit over the Brontes, and what the Brontes would have been like. I know some people have read this, are a bit suspicious about this relationship that they have and whether the Wing Commander actually really is into the Brontes this much. I thought he was. The story really does centre around Julia and her unique way of dealing with pain. She's had a miscarriage in the past, and the way that she deals with that, if you read that bit and then you think some of the things that she's doing was a little bit superfluous, I would say read that bit again and see, do you think actually the way that she deals with pain is actually quite, that's how she deals with life. When you find out actually what has happened between her and her husband at the end of the book, you realise too that she's covered up an awful lot of emotions that she's been feeling all the way through. And the book is about Julia's and Eleanor's suppressed emotions, and Eleanor actually says at one stage in the book that Eleanor meets some communists, and she loves the way that they live their lives together in the open, and they talk about everything, and they have this sense of community, because she feels like herself and Julia, which is quite true, live these really quite secluded lives, and they just happen. Lives just happen every day without any real meaning or feeling. And so Julia wants to join the communists for this reason, but doesn't particularly want. I don't think she has any real interest in communism. Not Julia, sorry, Eleanor has no real interest in communism. Whereas Julia has this wicked sense of humour. She really sees what people are like. She knows what they're actually up to much quicker than people give her credit for. And she's this wicked sense of humour. There's one scene where she's ironing, and she doesn't want to iron because I think the Wing Commander is there, and she doesn't want to iron either of her husband's or her own underwear in front of the Wing Commander. So she picks up a pair of Eleanor's knickers because she doesn't like Eleanor and irons that in front of him. Just, you know, and there's no reason except she's just has a vicious sense of humour, and poor Eleanor feels the brunt of it. I am an absolute fan of how Elizabeth Taylor has drawn these characters. I know a lot of people don't like them. A lot of people in general seem to be liking the children in this book and not so much the adults. I actually am quite fond of Julia. I have met some people in real life who are quite like her, and who would act like her, and they would have real emotional depths that just don't show it. And I'm really looking forward to reading my next Elizabeth Taylor, which I think is pronounced Paladin, if I'm pronouncing that wrong, sorry. And that is the end of my wrap-up. I rabbited on, as per usual, just about made the light. I hope whatever you're reading, you're enjoying it, and that this video doesn't end up too long when I put them all the little pieces together when I join myself, and you're going to see the daylight go. Oh, that's a little dance. So, maybe I should always end. Here's a little dance. So I hope you're enjoying whatever you're reading. And until next time,